please start with a few words about yourself, what you're doing, the past.
Absolutely. My name is Stephen Norris. I am a professor of history and the director of the Havighurst Center for East European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. I've been at Miami since 2002 when I finished my PhD in history, and I've been director of the Havighurst Center for almost a decade now. Um, my scholarly interest overall are on propaganda in the Russian Empire, especially during wartime. That was the subject of my dissertation and first book. Soviet propaganda. I'm writing a biography of Boris Yefimov, the caricaturist who worked for Izvestia and other important media outlets in the Soviet Union. And I've also written a book about post-Soviet Russian propaganda focusing on blockbuster movies in the Putin era from 2000 to 2008 or so, maybe Putin 1.0. So that's a thread that runs through all of my scholarly interests. That is the way propaganda functions, the way it's functioned across time, and some of the differences between, say, Imperial Russian propaganda, Soviet propaganda, and now present day Putinist propaganda.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, that's the reason why we have you for the lecture. Um, Maybe why the topic of your lectures is specifically relevant.
Yeah, right. So when I wrote this book on called Blockbuster History in the New Russia, which focuses on the explosion of popular movies between 2000 and 2008, it was in many ways an unexpected book and an unexpected focus for me because I was spending a lot of time in Russia researching my first book and then the Yefimov topic, and I just noticed when I was out after spending time in libraries and archives or talking to friends, the the role that movies played in particular, and the way that a kind of subtle patriotic culture was developing in Russia that wasn't really driven by the state at that point. So that was the kind of primary conclusion of that book. That is that between 2000 and 2008, Russian film directors and people associated with the film industry revived a sense of Russian patriotism in all kinds of forms, mostly from below, and that by the end of the decade, the Putinist state had kind of latched onto it and made it part of their own political programming. That was a relatively banal conclusion, I suppose, not necessarily ominous, especially as Putin left office in 2008. And I thought maybe that was the end of this line of my research. But then in 2012, when Putin returned to the presidency, and returned in the wake of protests and implemented a much more oppressive cultural system, a much more oppressive political system in general. I've been tracking how that played out in movies ever since. And then that's really the focus of this lecture. In some ways, it's the sequel to this book I wrote in an hour long or whatever, however long form that's going to talk about the changes in this patriotic culture and how particularly the Putinist state has played a much bigger role in making sure that the right sorts of movies are put on screens and that the right sort of narratives that kind of rehash the Second World War and reapply it to the present day are a regular part of what Russians consume. So yeah, that's what I'll be talking about. That's why it's significant. And of course, this was taking place before 2022. That is the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. But in some ways, the change in patriotic culture under the second Putin era anticipated the ways in which the Putin state would talk about the invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, specifically in combination with the Ukraine war. I mean, you pointed it out actually, but still, I will ask, how do you think your topic relates to the theme of the semester of ICEUR school? So, the topic of the semester. What do you think how it relates to the topic?
Yeah, I mean, clearly the global impact of the Ukrainian war is one that's felt everywhere now. I think people understand that Russian propaganda is significant. I don't know, and we'll see when I talk to the class and engage with people in it, how much is known about the way that cultural policies inform political policies. And it may seem odd to most of us that talking about movies is also a way of talking about warfare, both warfare imagined and warfare as actually experienced. Because some of the people associated with this turn in Putinist culture are have played major roles in the war itself, how it's waged, how it's engaged with in the form of diplomacy. I have to put that in quotes. So Vladimir Medinsky, for example, who's going to be a major figure in my talk, was named the Minister of Culture by Putin in 2012. He held that position until 2020. He's now a kind of special envoy of sorts. He was the person Putin tapped to supposedly hold the first peace talks in 2022. He's now in charge of the overall patriotic curriculum being implemented throughout Russia. So this is not a minor figure, in other words. He played a major role in making sure that the right sort of movies got made. I mean, he actually every year had a list of topics that he wanted filmmakers and cultural figures to produce. So I'm not sure how well known that is. Or people know
Mm.
Sergei Shoigu, for example, the Minister of Defense, kind of the ultimate political survivor under Putin, for his very poor uh, record in waging the war. But Shoigu actually, also with Medinsky co-founded a Russian Military Historical Society that lent a lot of legitimacy to some fairly spurious historical arguments. They produced films together. They collectively made a Patriot Park outside of Moscow. So there's lots of really interesting ways that politics, culture, and warfare collide in Putin's Russia. That'll be what I'm talking about, and that speak to this theme of this class.
So I assume, like when students would ask, what will they learn in your lecture, you will refer a lot to maybe what you think could be like common knowledge. I mean, we talk about the academic background, but still like common knowledge. So you try to find out how much they actually know, and then try to build up on this.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm not sure how much students know about, say, movies in Russia right now, or
Mm.
popular culture in Russia right now, or the patriotic culture in general in Russia right now. And then maybe even more broadly, it speaks to what we do and don't know about the way Russian propaganda works, and the way that the both World War II and Ukraine as a country and its history have been appropriated by the Putinist state and made part of an official narrative well before 2022 that in part drove the decision to go to war and in part informs the way the Putinist state speaks about the war. It's very much a movie-made war. It was in many ways the Ukrainian war as waged by the Russian state was imagined to be a World War II movie.
Mm. Um, maybe, I mean, what's your motivation to take part and give this lecture? Um, what do you expect, maybe? I mean, it's the first time you do a lecture for ICO, right? Or isn't
It
it?
is, although I
It
actually
is,
did an
yeah.
interview in 2022 with one of your predecessors. I forget his name, but we
Max,
did one
maybe?
of these. I think so. Maybe there was
Yeah,
a
yeah,
YouTube kind of I talked
yeah,
about narratives of war and
yeah.
some of the culture of the Putin era with him. It was posted on YouTube. So that's partly my motivation is I already knew of your institution. I enjoyed the talk I had before. It was
Yeah,
not a lecture in a class, so that's always a
fair.
nice challenge to take on for me.
Yeah. Um, I mean, that's like these are the most important questions for the interview. Maybe something you want to talk about very shortly, something that's very important for you or very specific. I mean, your topic is quite specific, to be honest. It's very interesting.
Thank you.
Also for me as a political science student. But still maybe something you want to talk about very shortly, something you want to mention, point out.
It may be it's the answer to the question that isn't unasked, but that you implied as a political science student. I mean, this is a very much a contemporary topic. I am trained as a historian of the Russian Empire and the Soviet Empire. But what has fascinated me since writing this second book on movies. And what has fascinated me, especially in traveling a lot in Russia in the 1990s and early 2000s for various historical research projects, is this emergence of a form of popular culture that itself is an echo of some of the themes I've have researched. So it got me very much interested in the uses of historical memory, the way in which movies in particular are such a significant site for articulating historical memories. And that then and then directing the center I direct is very much an effort in interdisciplinarity. So I mean this is just a seemingly fun topic that has become quite serious because of this war launched on Ukraine, that where some of the things I've observed have helped me understand the reasons for launching this war and the way in which the war is being explained to Russians that taps into these deeper historical issues. So it's,